I never thought I'd find myself in a situation like this, sharing my story with strangers on the internet. But here I am, sitting in my living room, staring at the mess my life has become. I guess I should start from the beginning, the moment everything started to unravel. My name is Alex, and I'm a 34-year-old marketing manager at a mid-sized tech company. I've been married to my wife, Jessica, for 6 years. We had a decent life together, nothing glamorous, but it worked. To be honest, I'd always considered our relationship rock solid. Jessica was beautiful, ambitious, and always seemed to have my back, or at least that's what I thought. We had our ups and downs like any couple, but I believed we were building a life together. Lately, I had sensed something was off. Jessica had become distant, often glued to her phone, and I could feel a shift in her mood. It started subtly. She'd spend late hours at work more often, coming home exhausted. I dismissed it at first because, hey, the grind of corporate life can drain anyone. But as weeks passed, her excuses piled up: meetings, dinners with clients, and the occasional "I just need some space" line. I wanted to believe her, but a nagging feeling told me something wasn't right. The first real sign that struck me came on a Friday night. I came home early, planning a surprise dinner for us. I pulled into the driveway, excited, when I noticed a car parked in front of our house that I didn't recognize. My heart sank a little, but I shrugged it off. Maybe it was a neighbor or one of her friends stopping by. I walked in with a smile, ready to impress her with my culinary skills, but when I opened the door, the house was eerily quiet. I called out her name, but no response. I moved toward the kitchen and found her phone sitting on the counter. The screen lit up with a message from someone named Mark. My gut twisted as I picked it up, and for a moment I hesitated, feeling like I was crossing a line. But curiosity got the better of me. I opened the message and my heart dropped. It was flirty, full of emojis and inside jokes I didn't understand. It wasn't the first time I'd seen messages like that, but this time it hit harder. I confronted Jessica when she walked in half an hour later. I could feel the tension simmering between us, and I knew I couldn't hold back any longer. "Who's Mark?" I asked, my voice steady despite the storm brewing inside me. Her face went pale and the color drained from her cheeks. "What are you talking about?" she replied, but I could see the guilt written all over her face. I pressed her, demanding answers. She deflected, trying to laugh it off, claiming it was just a work colleague with whom she'd shared a few jokes. But I could see through her lies, her nervous laughter doing nothing to alleviate the tension. As she tried to reassure me, my mind was racing. I couldn't shake the feeling of betrayal, the notion that she had built this wall between us, letting someone else in. I was heartbroken, anger coursing through me like a rapid tide. I didn't want to fall apart in front of her, but I felt completely blindsided. As the night wore on, we exchanged words that cut deeper than knives. I was angry and she was defensive. I wanted to scream at her for not being honest, for choosing to lie instead of facing me with the truth. She tossed in excuses about work stress and needing attention, but nothing justified what I had seen. In that moment, I realized I had to take action. This wasn't just a bump in the road. It was a full-blown detour away from the life we had built. I felt betrayed, humiliated, and lost. The anger morphed into a plan, a desire for retribution. I knew I could not let this slide. All of this was just the beginning. What I would do next would change everything. The days that followed the confrontation were a blur of emotions. I felt like I was living in a haze, my mind consumed by thoughts of betrayal and disbelief. Jessica tried to mend things, offering half-hearted apologies, but I wasn't ready to forgive her. I couldn't just brush this under the rug. The reality of her infidelity gnawed at me like a hungry parasite, and I wasn't going to let it consume me without a fight. I threw myself into work, trying to keep my mind off the mess at home. I buried myself in projects, staying late, and even picking up extra assignments. My office was my refuge, a place where I could pretend that life was normal, even if it was just for a little while. But no matter how much I focused on my job, thoughts of Jessica's affair were a constant echo in my head. One evening, while I was going through some reports, I had an idea. I needed to gather evidence, not just for my own peace of mind, but also to confront her with undeniable proof of her betrayal. If she thought she could charm her way out of this, she was sadly mistaken. I had to show her that I wouldn't be a fool any longer. I decided to dig deeper. I started by looking through her social media accounts, checking her text messages when she wasn't around. What I discovered was shocking but also confirming of my worst fears. She and Mark had been texting for months, and their conversations were laced with flirtation that left little to the imagination. It wasn't just a simple workplace crush. It was an affair, complete with plans to meet up, inside jokes, and intimate exchanges that made me feel like a ghost in my own marriage. The anger I felt was a throbbing pulse. I could barely contain it. I had trusted her, and in turn, she had shattered that trust. I wanted to confront her with everything I had found, to watch her squirm under the weight of her lies. But I also wanted to make her pay, not just emotionally, but in a way that would make her truly regret her choices. That's when I decided to formulate my plan for revenge. I started by reaching out to my assistant, a bright and ambitious woman named Lily. She had always shown me respect and had a charm that drew people in. I'd noticed her interest in me during meetings, and though I hadn't encouraged it, my recent situation had opened my eyes to what genuine admiration felt like. It was time to flip the script. I invited Lily to drinks one Friday night under the guise of discussing work. She was enthusiastic, and I could see the spark in her eyes when I suggested we meet after hours. In the back of my mind, I knew I was stepping into murky waters, but I also felt a thrill I hadn't experienced in a long time. A sense of power surged through me. I was no longer the victim, I was the one taking control. Over drinks, our conversation flowed easily. I shared my passion for marketing and my vision for the company. I could tell she was impressed. It felt good to be admired, to have someone genuinely interested in what I had to say. As the night wore on, I let the facade slip just a little, hinting at my recent struggles with Jessica without going into detail. Lily responded with compassion, and her support felt refreshing. I knew what I was doing was dangerous, but in that moment I felt alive again. It was intoxicating to think of how I could turn the tables on Jessica. I couldn't just let her get away with this. She had to see that her actions had consequences. I would show her that I was capable of moving on and finding someone who truly appreciated me. That same night, when I returned home, I felt a rush of adrenaline. I was still angry, but I also felt a sense of empowerment. I had a plan, a path forward that didn't involve wallowing in self-pity or begging for Jessica to change. No, I was going to find my own happiness, and it started with drawing a line in the sand. When I confronted Jessica again, I made sure to approach it differently. I wasn't just going to ask her about her affair. I was going to lay it all out. I told her that I knew everything, the texts, the plans, the lies. Her face fell, and for the first time I saw genuine fear wash over her. She stammered, trying to deny things, but I wouldn't let her weave her web of deceit again. "You've crossed a line, Jess. I'm done with the games," I said firmly. "I'm not the fool you think I am." Her initial shock quickly turned into anger. She accused me of invading her privacy, of being paranoid, but I didn't care. I had her cornered, and I could see the cracks in her facade. The emotional impact of this confrontation was a whirlwind. I felt a mix of satisfaction and sadness. I had been pushed to this point, but it hurt to see the person I had once loved so deeply reduced to someone who had betrayed my trust. I was angry, yes, but I also felt a twinge of regret. Regret that we had come to this, that our love had morphed into something so toxic. But I knew in my heart that I could no longer stay in this toxic environment. The decision was made. I was going to move forward with my life, and that would begin with confronting my feelings head-on and taking real action. I wouldn't allow her betrayal to define me. I'd rise from the ashes and reclaim my worth. The next steps were going to be challenging, but I was ready. The following weeks felt like a fever dream. I was caught in a whirlwind of emotions, grief, anger, and an unexpected sense of liberation. After confronting Jessica about her affair, I had decided to take definitive action, yet I was still navigating the murky waters of heartbreak. I knew I had to make a choice, and it was becoming clearer with each passing day. I wasn't going to stay in a relationship built on lies and deceit. I began to formulate my plan more concretely. My interactions with Lily had opened up a new side of my life, one where I felt respected and appreciated. The more I got to know her, the more I realized she embodied everything I had been missing from my marriage. She was ambitious, intelligent, and had a genuine warmth that made me feel valued. She listened to me, encouraged my ideas, and most importantly, she treated me like an equal. As I spent more time with her, I started to feel a spark again, something I hadn't experienced in what felt like ages. It was exhilarating. I began to look forward to seeing her, whether it was during work hours or our after-work meetups. Our chemistry was effortless, and I couldn't help but feel guilty about how quickly I was moving on. But the truth was, I was done with feeling like a victim. Jessica, on the other hand, was desperately trying to win me back. She would text me throughout the day, apologizing profusely, promising to change, and even suggesting couples therapy. But honestly, I didn't want to hear it. I had seen enough to know that her behavior was not going to change overnight. She was living in a fantasy world, thinking I would just forgive her and forget everything. That's not how trust works. One evening, I decided it was time to have another serious conversation with her. I waited until she came home, and I could see that she had put in some effort to look nice. Dressed in a fitted dress, her hair done perfectly, she seemed to be pulling out all the stops, but I wasn't swayed. I had my mind made up. "Jess," I said, trying to keep my tone steady, "we need to talk." Her eyes flickered with concern, but she didn't say anything. I continued, "I've been doing a lot of thinking, and I don't think we can fix this." She immediately jumped in, pleading with me to reconsider. "Alex, please don't say that. I know I messed up, but I love you. I want to make things right." Her voice cracked, and I could see the tears welling up in her eyes. "Do you really love me, Jess? Because it doesn't feel that way." "Love doesn't involve lying and cheating," I countered, my voice firm. "You've broken my trust, and it's not something that can be repaired easily." I could see her desperation rising. She tried to argue that it was a mistake, a moment of weakness, but I had heard it all before. I wasn't buying it. "You made choices, Jess. You chose to betray me. And now you want me to believe that you can just flip a switch and everything will be fine. It doesn't work that way." The confrontation quickly escalated. I could see her anger bubbling beneath the surface as she shouted back, "You're being unreasonable. You're throwing away our whole life over one mistake." That was the moment when I truly felt a shift within me. I realized that I had to stand my ground. This wasn't about being harsh. It was about reclaiming my identity and my self-worth. "It's not just one mistake, it's a pattern, Jess. I deserve better than this. I deserve someone who respects me, and right now I don't think that's you." Her face contorted with frustration, and for a moment I thought she might hit me with something truly nasty. But instead she broke down, bursting into tears. "Please, Alex, I can change. I'll do anything. Just give me another chance." I felt a pang of sadness as I watched her crumble, but I could allow myself to be swayed by her tears. I had to think about my future, my happiness. "I'm sorry, but it's too late for that," I said softly, though my heart felt heavy with the weight of my words. After I walked away from the conversation, I felt an overwhelming sense of relief mixed with sorrow. I was finally letting go of a relationship that had become toxic, despite the love that once existed. I needed to focus on myself, my future, and the person I wanted to be. As I continued to build my connection with Lily, I realized how crucial it was for me to surround myself with people who uplifted me. I could feel my self-confidence growing. With every laugh shared and every deep conversation we had, I was reminded of the kind of love I deserved, one that was built on mutual respect and admiration. But even as I found myself drawn closer to Lily, I grappled with feelings of guilt about leaving Jessica. I had been with her for so long, and despite everything, I still cared about her. I didn't want to be the bad guy. In the midst of all this, I made the difficult choice to inform Jessica that I was moving out. It wasn't easy, and I could see the devastation on her face when I broke the news. But I knew it was the right thing to do for both of us. I needed to reclaim my life, and she needed to confront the reality of her actions. As I packed my bags, I felt a mix of emotions, fear of the unknown, but also a sense of liberation. I was finally taking control of my life, and no matter how painful this transition might be, I had to trust that it was leading me to something better. I walked away from that chapter of my life, ready to embrace what lay ahead. The journey was just beginning, but I was determined to forge my own path. Moving out of the house I had shared with Jessica was surreal. Each box I packed felt like a memory being sealed away. I spent a few days going through our things, sorting through the remnants of what used to be our life together. There were happy memories hidden amongst the painful reminders, and every time I stumbled upon a photo that captured us. Smiling at some event, it pulled at my heartstrings, but I had to keep reminding myself why I was doing this. I found a small apartment not too far from the house, which allowed me the convenience of staying close to my job. It was a modest place, nothing fancy, but it felt like a fresh start. I spent the first night there on an air mattress, staring at the blank walls, taking in the stark reality of my new life. I could hear the silence echoing back at me, a stark contrast to the noise of my previous life filled with Jessica's chatter and laughter. The emptiness felt overwhelming, yet oddly freeing. I threw myself into work as a distraction, but I also felt my confidence growing. My interactions with Lily blossomed into something meaningful. We started having lunch together almost every day, and soon enough, I was inviting her over to my new place. I didn't want to rush things, but I couldn't deny the chemistry we had. She brought a lightness to my life that I hadn't realized was missing. One evening, as we sat on my not-so-comfortable couch, sharing takeout and laughter, I felt a warmth spreading through. I didn't want to be unfair to Lily by projecting my past onto her, but I also wanted her to know that I was ready to explore this new connection. "Lily," I said, pausing for a moment to collect my thoughts, "I really enjoy spending time with you." She smiled, her eyes sparkling. "I feel the same way, Alex. There's something special between us." I took a deep breath, deciding to be vulnerable for a moment. I just got out of a really tough situation, and I'm still figuring things out. I don't want to jump into anything too fast, but I also don't want to miss out on what's happening between us. Her expression softened. "I understand. We can take things at our own pace. I'm here for you." Those words meant everything. It was a relief to find someone who respected my boundaries while still being genuinely interested in me. As our relationship grew, I started to heal. The laughter and shared moments offered a refreshing change, allowing me to put the pain of my past behind me. However, Jessica didn't take my departure well. She would text me frequently, trying to elicit a response. Sometimes she would sound desperate, pleading for another chance, while other times she'd lash out in anger, blaming me for everything that had gone wrong. I tried to remain calm, responding only when necessary, but the emotional toll of her erratic behavior weighed heavily on me. One day I received a text from her that caught me off guard. "I need to talk to you. Can we meet up?" I wasn't sure if it was a good idea, but part of me felt a sense of obligation. After all, we had shared a life together, and I knew it would help me move on if I could have one final conversation with her. So I agreed to meet her at a coffee shop, hoping for closure. When I arrived, Jessica was already seated, fidgeting with her coffee cup. She looked different, more vulnerable than I had seen her in a while. There were dark circles under her eyes, and she seemed smaller somehow. I took a seat across from her, bracing myself for whatever was about to unfold. "Thank you for coming," she said quietly, her voice shaky. "I know things have been rough, but I've been thinking a lot about everything." I nodded, waiting for her to continue. "I want you to know that I'm sorry," she said, tears welling in her eyes. "I've messed up in ways I can't even explain. I never meant to hurt you, Alex. I was just lost." Her words sounded genuine, but I was cautious. "You've had time to think, Jess, and I hope you understand why I had to leave. Trust is everything in a relationship, and you broke that." "I know," she whispered, wiping a tear from her cheek. "I just didn't realize how much I needed you until it was too late. I thought I could keep everything separate, but it all spiraled out of control. I miss you." Hearing her say that hit me harder than I expected. I had loved this woman, and part of me still did, but I had to remind myself of the pain she caused. "Missing me doesn't change what happened. You chose to betray our marriage, and that's not something I can overlook." She nodded, looking defeated. "I understand. I just wanted to say that I'm working on myself. I'm in therapy. And I'm trying to understand why I made those choices. I want to be a better person." "Good for you," I replied, trying to keep my emotions in check. "But that doesn't mean I'll be waiting around for you to figure things out. I need to focus on myself now." A silence fell between us, thick with unspoken words. I could sense her frustration mixed with a desperate hope that I would change my mind. I felt a twinge of guilt for being so firm, but I had to stay strong. "I'm truly sorry, Alex," she said at last, her voice barely above a whisper. "I hope you find happiness." With that, the conversation concluded, and I left the coffee shop feeling a mix of relief and sadness. I had finally confronted the lingering ghosts of my past, but it was bittersweet. As I drove home, I reflected on how far I had come since discovering her betrayal. I was no longer the naive husband who would accept lies. I was becoming someone stronger, someone who was ready to embrace a brighter future without the weight of betrayal dragging him down. As I settled back into my apartment, I felt renewed optimism. My connection with Lily was blossoming, and I was allowing myself to be open to love once again. I was learning to trust myself, and that was the first step toward healing completely. I knew I still had a journey ahead, but for the first time in a long time, I felt hopeful about the road that lay ahead. As the weeks rolled on, my life began to feel more stable. I was settling into my new apartment, embracing my independence, and forming a deeper connection with Lily. Our relationship blossomed effortlessly, filled with shared laughter, deep conversations, and a palpable chemistry that reignited a spark in my heart that I hadn't felt in years. Lily had a vibrant energy that was contagious. She inspired me to try new things and pushed me to embrace life beyond my work. We spent weekends exploring local parks, trying out new restaurants, and even attending some art shows. Each experience felt fresh, as if I were rediscovering parts of myself that had been dormant during my turbulent relationship with Jessica. But even amidst this newfound joy, remnants of my past lingered. I'd catch myself reflecting on moments with Jessica, both good and bad. Sometimes I'd feel a pang of nostalgia, especially when I'd come across an old photo or song that reminded me of the early days of our relationship. But those moments were becoming fewer and further between, overshadowed by the realization of how deeply I was healing. One evening, as I was preparing dinner for Lily at my apartment, I received a call from an unknown number. It was unusual for me to get calls like that, and curiosity led me to answer. To my shock, it was Jessica on the line. "Alex, can we talk?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. I hesitated for a moment, still grappling with the memories of our last encounter. "What is it?" "I know I've said I'm working on myself, but I really want to explain everything that's happened since we last spoke. I think it's important for you to hear me out," she insisted. I sighed, weighing my options. Part of me wanted to dismiss the call, but another part felt a flicker of responsibility. I had spent so long with her, and perhaps it would be beneficial to understand her perspective more fully. "All right, where do you want to meet?" We agreed to meet at the same coffee shop where we'd had our last conversation. I arrived a bit early, my mind racing with anticipation and anxiety. What could she possibly say that would change anything? As I sipped my coffee, I prepared myself for what might be an emotionally charged conversation. When Jessica walked in, I couldn't help but notice the change in her demeanor. She appeared more composed, wearing a modest outfit and her hair pulled back neatly. It was clear she had put thought into this meeting. She approached me with an air of seriousness, and I could see a determination in her eyes that hadn't been there before. "I appreciate you meeting me," she began, settling into her seat. "I promise I'm not here to plead for another chance. I just want to be honest about everything." I nodded, bracing myself for the flood of emotions I was sure would follow. "I've been in therapy for a few months now, and it's been incredibly eye-opening. I've realized that I've been running away from my problems for so long. The affair, my workaholic tendencies, everything was a way to avoid facing myself," she explained, her voice trembling slightly. As she spoke, I found myself torn between empathy and anger. I wanted to believe she was genuinely remorseful, but the scars of her betrayal were still fresh. "It's good that you're seeking help, Jessica, but it doesn't undo what happened," I replied, trying to keep my tone neutral. "I know," she said, tears filling her eyes. "But I wanted to take responsibility for my actions. I've hurt you deeply, and I understand if you can't forgive me. I just wanted you to know that I'm working on becoming a better person." Her words struck a chord, and while I appreciated her honesty, I also felt the urge to protect myself from the emotional turmoil that came with her presence. "I hope you find that healing, Jess, but I have to focus on my life now. I can't keep revisiting the pain." She nodded, her expression filled with understanding. "I respect that. I don't expect anything from you anymore. I just wanted you to know how sorry I am." We talked for a little while longer, engaging in a candid conversation about our lives since the split. It was bittersweet. I could see the woman I had loved, but I also recognized the distance that had grown between us, a chasm created by her choices. As we wrapped up our conversation, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. I had faced my past and confronted the woman who had hurt me, allowing me to finally close that chapter. I didn't leave the meeting with any lingering guilt or regret. Instead, I felt a renewed sense of strength. Once I returned home, I immediately texted Lily, asking her if she wanted to come over for dinner. I knew I needed to share the experience with her, not because I needed approval, but because I wanted her to understand the journey I was on. When Lily arrived, I cooked us a simple yet delicious meal, excited to share the details of my day. As we sat together at the dining table, I explained my meeting with Jessica. "I'm proud of you for facing her," Lily said, her eyes warm with encouragement. "It sounds like you've taken a huge step toward closure." "I think I have," I replied, feeling the weight of the conversation settle in. "It's still hard to process, but I'm ready to move on for good now." We spent the evening talking, laughing, and enjoying each other's company. I could feel the connection between us deepening, and it was a reminder of how far I had come. I was no longer the man who had been shattered by betrayal. I was someone new, someone who had learned to stand tall in the face of adversity. That night, as I lay in bed, the events of the past few months replayed in my mind. I was grateful for the journey that had led me to this point. I had faced heartbreak, betrayal, and pain, but I had also discovered my strength and resilience. In the quiet of the night, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. I was ready to embrace the future with all its uncertainties and possibilities. I knew I had a long way to go, but for the first time, I felt genuinely hopeful about what lay ahead. I was ready to let love in again, and this time I would do it on my own terms. As I continued to navigate this new chapter in my life, the connection with Lily deepened at an astonishing pace. Each day brought new laughter and experiences that reminded me of the joy I had been missing. It felt like I was finally emerging from a long, dark tunnel, and I could see the light ahead, the light of hope, love, and possibilities. Lily became a significant part of my everyday life. We started planning weekend adventures, exploring new hiking trails, attending live music events, and even cooking together. Her passion for life was infectious. I found myself smiling more, laughing harder, and rediscovering what it meant to be genuinely happy. She was more than just a distraction. She was someone I could see a future with. But even in this newfound happiness, I still had moments where the shadows of my past flickered back into my mind. I'd occasionally receive messages from Jessica, updates on her therapy, or attempts to check in. Each time I felt a mix of emotions, pity, anger, and sometimes even a twinge of sadness. But I reminded myself of the journey I had undertaken, the lessons I had learned, and how important it was to keep moving forward. One afternoon, as I was sitting on my small balcony with a cup of coffee, I reflected on everything that had transpired over the past year. I thought about how naive I had been, fully trusting Jessica, and how painful the betrayal had been. But I also recognized that it had led me to this moment of clarity and growth. I had become stronger and more self-aware, and I was grateful for that transformation. I felt ready to embrace my future with open arms, unburdened by the mistakes of my past. I had learned to appreciate the value of respect, honesty, and open communication in relationships. Those lessons would guide me as I continued to nurture my bond with Lily. As the weeks turned into months, Lily and I celebrated our growing connection. One evening, as we were cooking dinner together, I turned to her, feeling the warmth of the moment. "I really cherish what we have," I said, my heart full. She looked at me, her eyes sparkling. I feel the same way, Alex. I never imagined we would have such a strong connection so quickly. I think it's because we're both open and honest with each other. That's something I've learned the hard way, I replied, a smile spreading across my face. After dinner, we sat on the couch, cuddled together as we watched a movie. In that peaceful moment, I felt contentment wash over me. This was what I had been searching for, a connection grounded in mutual respect and admiration. A few weeks later, on a weekend trip to the mountains, we embarked on a hike that took our breath away. Surrounded by the beauty of nature, I felt a sense of clarity wash over me. This was the moment I wanted to solidify our relationship. Standing at the peak with the sun setting behind us, I turned to Lily, my heart racing. "Hey, can I ask you something?" I said, trying to mask the nervousness in my voice. "Of course," she replied, her eyes wide with curiosity. "I know we haven't been together long, but I feel something really special between us, and I want to know if you feel ready to take our relationship to the next level." She looked at me, a bright smile breaking across her face. "Are you asking me to be your girlfriend?" I chuckled, relieved at her lightheartedness. "Yes, I am. I know it sounds cliché, but I want to explore this connection more seriously." Her expression softened and she took a step closer to me. "Absolutely. I'd love that." At that moment, everything felt right. I leaned in and kissed her gently, feeling the warmth of her affection envelop me. This was the beginning of a new life, one where I would embrace love without the weight of past betrayals holding me back. As we made our way back down the mountain, hand in hand, I felt a renewed sense of hope and promise. I knew that navigating relationships would always come with challenges, but I was ready to face them head-on. The journey with Jessica had taught me invaluable lessons about trust, respect, and self-worth. While I would always carry the scars of that experience, they now served as reminders of my growth. I had turned pain into strength and emerged on the other side, ready to embrace the future with open arms. In the end, I realized that life is a series of choices, and I had chosen to rise above the hurt. I was on a path to happiness, one filled with love, laughter, and all the possibilities that lay ahead. I was finally ready to build a new story, one that would honor my past while celebrating the bright future I was creating with Lily.